The noise from our family barbecue always had a certain rhythm to it, a steady blend of clattering plates, overdone laughter, and the smell of charcoal drifting across the backyard. But that afternoon, the rhythm changed. It was subtle at first, like a current shifting beneath the still water. A few heads turned. A few voices paused mid-sentence. I felt the shift before I understood it. I was making my way across the grass on my crutch, moving slower than I wanted, trying not to show how much pressure on my leg made my vision tighten at the edges. The yard was crowded with neighbors, cousins, co-workers my father liked to impress, and the usual group of people my parents invited to maintain an image. They all seemed louder and brighter than I could handle that day, but I kept going 'cause staying home had not been an option. My mother told me it would look bad if I did not show up. She always cared more about appearances than well-being. I was just a few feet from the picnic tables when I heard Evan's footsteps. Heavy, sharp, purposeful. Before the sound could fully register, his hand shot forward and yanked my crutch out from under me. My body lurched sideways, the world tilting, and then the ground punched up against me. The fall knocked the breath out of my lungs so violently that for a moment I could not inhale at all. My cheek mashed into the grass, the blades scratching my skin, and pain flared through my leg like a brand pressed against my bone. I tried to push up with my arms, but the pain only intensified. Above me, Evan's voice cut through the backyard chatter with a force cold enough to still everything else. "You think you can just ignore me? You owe me money, Mara. You hear me? You owe me." His words were so loud the entire yard seemed to turn toward us. People froze in mid-motion paper plates suspended in the air. Cups stopped halfway to lips. I could hear the sudden eerie hush that only happens when something crosses the line between normal family tension and something darker. I tried to speak, but my voice came out thin. "Evan, please give it back. Please." He laughed sharp and mocking, and then raised the crutch above his shoulder like he was about to swing a bat. Before I could pull my injured leg out of the way, the metal slammed down across my shin. A shock of pain so intense it felt electric tore through me. The sound that left my mouth did not feel like mine. I heard someone gasp behind me and another voice say quietly, "Oh my God!" But no one moved. Evan hit me again, and again. The blows landed with a sickening combination of metal and bone, each impact thudding through the grass and into my body. I curled in on myself, my hands clawing at the ground, desperate to pull my leg out of reach, but every tiny movement only triggered another jolt of pain. The world was shrinking into the rhythm of the strikes and the pounding of my heartbeat in my ears. I felt the heat of my father's grill behind me before I heard his voice. My father did not run toward us. He did not drop the spatula or the beer in his hand. He just looked up, took in the sight of his son beating me with my own crutch, and shouted with a voice full of irritation rather than concern. "Hit harder. Maybe she'll finally stop faking." A few people flinched at his words, their faces twisting in disbelief, but when one woman murmured, "This is wrong," my father snapped back without hesitation. "Mind your business." My chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with pain. This was not new. This was a pattern, a lifetime of being undermined, dismissed, overshadowed, invisible. Evan raised the crutch again. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the next impact. My breaths came in short, panicked bursts, each inhale scraping against my throat. But just before the strike came down, something flickered at the edge of my vision. A small, pulsing red light from the wooden fence at the back of the yard. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then I recognized the glow. The neighbor's Ring camera, recording. The realization cracked something inside me, not in pain, but in a desperate, tiny spark of hope. Someone was witnessing this. Something was capturing the truth I had spent years trying to explain. As I lay in the grass dirt on my face, pain burning through my leg, surrounded by people who watched but did nothing, I felt the weight of my own invisibility settle over me like a second skin. And in that moment, I understood something I had never been willing to admit. That day, I learned pain is not the worst thing. Being invisible is. I was not born invisible, but I learned early how easy it was for a child to disappear in her own home when her existence did not fit the story her parents wanted to tell. Growing up, I spent years trying to understand what made Evan the center of everything and what made me somehow an afterthought. People outside the family always said he had charisma, that he was bright, energetic, full of potential. They said I was quiet, responsible, mature for my age. They never understood that those words were just polite ways to describe a child who had learned that her feelings were inconvenient and her needs were a burden. My earliest memory of the imbalance was not dramatic. It was a Saturday morning when I was 6, playing in the living room with a set of ceramic figurines my aunt had given me. One slipped from my hand and cracked against the coffee table. I froze. My mother rushed in when she heard the noise, and before I could explain, Evan pointed at me and said she did it because she is jealous I have nicer toys. I tried to protest, tears welling up, but my father told me to apologize to Evan for upsetting him. I remember staring at the crack on the figurine and wondering how a lie could weigh more than the truth, simply because it came from the child they loved more. Moments like that happened again and again, small and sharp like paper cuts. Whenever something went wrong, someone forgot their homework. Someone spilled juice on the carpet. Someone broke a lamp. I was the apology, the explanation, the responsible one who should have prevented it. My mother used to say, "You are the older one. You understand more. You have to be patient with Evan." Except I was not the older one. Evan was. That did not matter. He fit the mold they wanted. I did not. I became the child who stood in the background of every photograph, always slightly turned, always slightly out of focus. At school, I got good grades, joined clubs, won awards, not because I wanted to be exceptional, but because I hoped achievements might finally make my parents look at me with pride instead of expectation. When I brought home certificates, my father barely glanced at them. He would nod and say, "Nice job, kiddo," then immediately ask if Evan needed help with his science project. My mother would tell me not to brag even when I had not said a word. Evan knew he was the favorite. He wore it like armor. When he was a teenager, he discovered that tears or tantrums could earn him whatever he wanted. If he wanted the bigger bedroom, he got it. If he wanted a new phone, he got it. If he did not want to do chores, he did not. And if I dared to say anything, my parents told me not to start drama. "It is easier this way, Mara. You know how he gets." I learned that calmness was my job. Sacrifice was my role. My feelings were optional. His were mandatory. The older we got, the clearer the roles became. Evan stayed out late, crashed cars, got suspended, lied about everything from tests to stolen money. But my parents treated each disaster like a tiny bump in his brilliant future. Boys will be boys. He will grow out of it. He just needs support. Meanwhile, I did exactly what they asked, exactly what society praises. I studied, I worked part-time, I saved money, I made responsible choices, but somehow all of that made me less deserving of compassion. I was too capable, too strong, too self-sufficient to need help. They used my strength as an excuse to burden me further, to rely on me for everything they did not want to handle. When Evan failed a class, I was expected to tutor him. When he overdrew his bank account, I was expected to cover the fees. When he smashed a side mirror on his old car, I was expected to pay for the repair because he was stressed and I should help family. And every time I questioned it, every time I hesitated, my parents said the same words. "You know your brother needs support. You know we expect more from you. You know you are the dependable one." Being dependable became a prison disguised as a compliment. I started working full-time right after graduating because someone had to keep things together. I took a second job doing freelance bookkeeping because Evan kept racking up bills my parents said he could not pay yet. Eventually, I became someone who carried everyone, but was never carried by anyone. When people outside the family asked why I helped so much, I always said the same thing, because I am the responsible one. But the truth was darker and harder to admit. I helped because I had been conditioned to believe I was worth nothing if I was not of use. The more I gave, the more they expected. The less I needed, the less they saw me. By the time I reached adulthood, being overlooked felt normal, expected, automatic. I was the person who ensured everything functioned while never being acknowledged for keeping it all standing. And the strange thing about invisibility is that you do not realize how much it shapes you until someone finally looks right at you and still chooses not to see you. Standing in that backyard on the day everything shattered, listening to my father encourage my brother to hurt me, I understood the truth. I had been circling around for years. I had never been enough for them, not as a child, not as an adult. Not even as a daughter begging for help while being beaten in front of a yard full of people. Their favorite child, their chosen hero, was the boy who broke things. And I was the girl expected to sweep them up quietly. Money was never just money in my family. It was loyalty, obligation, leverage, and guilt all braided together until no one could tell where one ended and the next began. I did not realize I had been trapped in that system until much later. At the time, I thought I was simply doing what a good daughter and a good sister did. I thought helping meant love. Maybe that was the first lie I ever believed. When Evan and I reached adulthood, our paths split sharply. I went straight into full-time work because I had to. College had been a luxury I could not afford unless I paid for every cent of it myself. My parents said they wished they could help, but then they turned around and spent thousands on Evan's new gaming computer, claiming it would help him stay motivated. I graduated, took an entry-level accounting job, and paid my own tuition at night. Evan dropped out of community college twice. My parents said he needed time to figure himself out. He always seemed to need time, money, patience, understanding, forgiveness. And I always seemed to supply it. He never held a job for long. Either the managers were unfair, or the coworkers jealous, or the schedule unreasonable. Every new failure was framed as a crisis the family had to solve together. Together meant me. I paid his phone bill because he needed it for job applications. I paid for his car insurance because he needed to get to interviews. I paid for his textbooks because he swore he was trying again. Whenever I hesitated, my mother's voice turned soft and wounded, as if my refusal would cause the family to splinter in half. Mara, you know he struggles. He needs support. You have always been the responsible one. My father was blunter. We raised you to help family. Do not embarrass us by being selfish. I was in my early 20s when the monthly bills began to feel like a second rent payment. Evan's car repairs, Evan's overdraft fees, Evan's credit card debt because he thought credit meant free money. Every time I tried to talk to my parents about boundaries, they looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Your brother depends on us. You are doing well. You can handle this. What they meant was this: Evan was their future, their hope, their project. I was their resource. The more I earned, the more I owed. It was not a surprise that by the time Evan turned 25, he had never saved $1 in his life. He assumed someone would catch him. Someone always had. When I was promoted to senior accountant, I thought maybe I could finally breathe. My salary increased. My workload evened out. For a brief moment, I imagined a future where I had my own apartment, my own savings, my own life. The fantasy lasted 3 days. On the 4th day, Evan called crying. Not sad crying, manipulative crying. He said he rear-ended someone in a parking lot and needed $700 immediately, or he would get sued. My parents were panicked and furious, not at him, but at me for not answering earlier. Your brother is stressed, they scolded. He needs help. You have a new raise. Why are you hesitating? It did not matter that I had student loans. It did not matter that I was living paycheck to paycheck while they pretended everything was fine. What mattered was that Evan wanted money and they expected me to give it. It became a cycle so predictable I could calculate the dates like tax deadlines. Every few weeks, another crisis, another request, another lecture about family loyalty. The worst part was how normal it began to feel. This was my role. This was the system. This was what being the dependable one looked like. For a long time, I believed saying no would make me cruel, that refusing to help would prove I was cold or ungrateful. So I said yes, over and over. Even when it hurt, even when it emptied my bank account, even when it hollowed me out piece by piece. People outside the family noticed before I did. My coworker Janice once saw me sending a transfer during lunch and asked why I was paying someone named Evan so often. I deflected, saying he was between jobs and I was just helping until he got back on his feet. She frowned and said that is not helping Mara. That is enabling. I smiled politely and pretended not to understand. Inside, her words landed like a stone dropped in deep water. Another time, the neighbor across the street asked why Evan never worked and why I was always the one driving my parents to appointments or fixing things around the house. I told him the same lie I always told anyone who questioned it, because I am the responsible one. But even as I said it, I felt something crack. The truth was simpler. I was the only one they felt entitled to use. When my mother asked me to help cover Evan's dental bill, I paid it. When Evan forgot to renew his registration and got fined, I paid that too. When my father lost money in a careless investment and needed a cushion until payday, I stepped in. And every time I helped, they called me a blessing. Every time I hesitated, they called me difficult. My worth was measured entirely by what I could provide. Their love was conditional, and the conditions were endless. I did not realize I was being financially exploited. I did not have the language for it. All I knew was that the more I gave, the more they took, and the more invisible I became. I was not a daughter or a sister. I was a bank account with legs, a solution, a safety net, a permanent fallback plan. Years later, when the abuse became physical, when Evan raised my own crutch against me, the truth finally crystallized. This was never about money. It was about power, and I had been funding my own erasure for most of my life. The night my body finally gave out did not arrive with drama or warning. It slipped in quietly disguised as exhaustion, disguised as one more long shift at work, disguised as responsibilities I told myself I could handle because I had handled everything else. Looking back now, the truth feels obvious. My body had been whispering for years. That night, it screamed. I had worked a 10-hour day at the accounting firm, followed by 3 hours of freelance bookkeeping for a small business that needed their month-end reports rushed. My eyes felt gritty. My head throbbed. My shoulders ached from being tensed for too long. I told myself it was nothing. Just tired, just overworked, just the usual. I had been just tired for so many years that I no longer recognized the line between fatigue and collapse. I heated up leftovers, opened my laptop again, and kept working until midnight. When I finally shut it down, the numbers still swam in my vision. I had promised my parents I would stop by early the next morning because Evan had racked up another overdraft fee and they needed me to sort it out. My father sent a text saying, "Bring your laptop, your brother needs help too." It was never a request. It was a summons. I set my alarm for 6 and tried to sleep, but my mind kept racing. I worried about deadlines, about bills, about my checking account balance dipping lower than I liked. I worried about Evan showing up angry again, demanding more money, telling me I owed him. Sleep came in scraps. Not rest, just brief blackouts between waves of anxiety. When the alarm buzzed, I felt like I had not slept at all. I made coffee, grabbed my bag, and stepped into the cold, early morning air. The sky was pale and washed out a thin winter light stretching across the horizon. I remember thinking the world looked tired too. I got into my car, turned the heater on high, and drove toward my parents' house. Traffic was light, the roads quiet. My thoughts felt heavy, thick, looping through the same old burdens. What if I cannot keep helping them? What if my body does not keep up? What if I am one unexpected expense away from losing everything? I blinked too slowly at a stoplight. My hands were on the steering wheel, but I could not feel them. My head dipped forward. I snapped awake, heart racing, and told myself to focus. Only 10 more minutes. I can push through 10 more minutes. I rolled down the window to let in cold air, hoping it would shock me awake. It worked for about 30 seconds. The world felt distant, like I was watching my life from a few inches behind myself. I turned onto the long stretch of road leading to my parents' neighborhood. Trees blurred past. The hum of the engine blended with the hum inside my skull. My eyes burned. I blinked again. Too long. Far too long. And then everything dissolved. The next thing I remember is the sound. A violent, grinding, metallic roar followed by the shattering crack of glass exploding around me. My body whipped forward, then snapped back. Pain radiated across my chest like a fist closing around my ribs. My car had swerved off the road and slammed into a row of parked vehicles along the curb. I do not know if I fell asleep for 2 seconds or 10, but it was enough. My forehead hit the steering wheel and stars burst across my vision. My leg twisted awkwardly under the dashboard. The more I tried to move, the more pain shot through it like fire. Someone was shouting outside. Doors opening. Footsteps. A stranger calling. "Are you okay? Stay still. Just stay still." My breath came out in short, shallow bursts. I felt like I was drowning in air. The world tilted, faded, returned. I heard sirens in the distance, the wail growing louder. When the paramedics arrived, one of them knelt beside me and said, "Do not move your leg. You may have a ligament tear or worse." His voice was calm, firm, practiced the kind of voice that made you obey, even if you were terrified. That was the moment I finally let go. For months, I had been forcing myself to move, to think, to provide, to fix, to manage everyone else's chaos. Now my body refused to cooperate. It had locked itself down like a machine, burning through its last remaining fuel. At the hospital, they confirmed what the paramedics suspected. Multiple torn ligaments, deep tissue damage, a hairline fracture that would take months to heal. I stared at the X-ray like it belonged to someone else. How did I let myself get this broken? When my parents walked into the hospital room, I thought stupidly that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time they would worry about me. Maybe this was the line. The moment they would finally see me. My mother barely glanced at my leg. My father did not even sit down. Before asking how I felt, before asking what the doctor said, before acknowledging the swelling or the bruises or the IV in my arm, he exhaled loudly and asked the question that still echoes in my memory. "So what about Evan's car payment? You are still covering it, right?" That was the moment the last thread inside me snapped. I realized that even lying in a hospital bed, injured, exhausted, and afraid, I was not a daughter to them. I was a solution. I was a wallet. I was a resource. I was expendable. My body had given up because I had spent years pretending it could handle the weight of a family that never once tried to lighten the load. And as they stood by my bed waiting for me to reassure them that their golden boy would not suffer any financial inconvenience because of my accident, I finally understood how deeply alone I had been all along. The weeks after the accident blurred together in a haze of doctor visits, physical therapy sessions, prescription painkillers that made my thoughts sluggish, and long nights where the pain in my leg pulsed so intensely it felt like my bones were beating to the rhythm of a drum. I spent most days on the couch with my leg elevated, trying to convince myself that I was healing, that soon I would return to normal, that the financial strain and emotional pressure would ease. But reality did not soften. It sharpened. My family's demands did not slow down because I had been injured. If anything, they increased. At first, they pretended to care. My mother brought soup a couple of times, always in a rush, always talking about something else. My father checked in once long enough to say, "You should have been more careful before asking whether I could log into his bank account and fix his budgeting software." But Evan did not bother with pretending. He walked into my apartment like he owned the place. He did not knock. He never knocked. He barged into my living room 3 days after my surgery, stepped over my crutches without a glance, and said he needed $800. Not asked. Needed. As if that amount of money grew in the seams of my sofa cushions. As if I had a reservoir of endless funds waiting for him. I was lying on the couch, pale and exhausted, my leg wrapped tight in a brace that felt like a cage. I looked at him, blinking slowly, my mind still thick from the medication. "Evan, I just had surgery. I cannot work overtime. I am already behind." He rolled his eyes so hard I could hear the irritation in his breath. "I do not care about your schedule. I need the money. My car is not drivable. You owe me." I pushed myself upright with difficulty, every movement sending sparks of pain through my thigh. "How do I owe you anything?" His jaw tightened. "Because you promised to help. You said family takes care of each other. You help them. You help Mom and Dad. You help everyone. So help me." The logic was so warped, so tangled, I did not know how to respond at first. I rubbed my temples, trying to focus. "Evan, I cannot give you $800. I do not have it." He stepped closer, looming over me. Yes, you do. You always have it. You are lying. You are pretending you are broke just to avoid helping me. Something inside me snapped. I had spent years bending myself into the shape they needed. I had paid his bills, covered, his fines, worked overtime until my vision blurred, and now he stood in my living room accusing me of lying because I did not have $800 to hand him while I could barely stand. I told him no. No, I cannot. His face twisted with fury so sharp it made my stomach tighten. No. You think you get to say no now. You think you get to sit here and act helpless. Your leg is not even that bad. You are just exaggerating so you do not have to pay. I stared at him stunned. He pointed at the brace on my leg. I know you are faking half of this. You are doing it for attention, for sympathy. You are doing it so everyone will stop expecting things from you. My voice cracked. Evan, I cannot believe you think I would fake an injury. I got into a real accident. I had real surgery. He scoffed. Maybe, but not as bad as you pretend. You want to get out of helping. That is all this is. He leaned closer, his breath hot with anger. You owe me, and if you do not pay me, then I will make you. The threat hung in the air, heavy and sour. Something cold slid down my spine. I reached for my crutches, needing to stand, needing distance, but the sudden movement sent pain shooting through my leg, and I gasped. Evan watched my struggle with an expression that was not sympathy or concern, but disgust. See? You are pretending. Nobody hurt that bad would move like that. Stop playing the victim. I gripped the crutch, my heart pounding. Get out! Evan's face darkened. You do not talk to me like that. I said, get out! He stared at me for a long, charged moment, his jaw working, his hands twitching at his sides like he was restraining himself from something worse. Then he muttered a long string of curses, shoved one of my dining chairs aside so hard it scraped across the floor, and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sagged back onto the couch, trembling. My leg throbbed, my head spun. My chest felt tight like someone had hooked their fingers inside my ribs and squeezed. What terrified me most was not the anger he showed. It was the realization that he truly believed I owed him my money, my time, my health, my safety. My parents called 30 minutes later, not to ask if I was okay, not to check on my pain, not to see if I needed help with medication or groceries or rent while I was unable to work. They called to scold me for upsetting Evan. Your brother is under a lot of stress. You know how sensitive he is. You should have been more understanding. I listened in stunned silence as they sided with him. Again. Always. And then, my father said the line that scraped across my heart with the same pain as the car crash. Family comes first. And you are failing us. Failing. As if my broken leg was not enough. As if my exhaustion was betrayal. As if I had somehow chosen to be injured just to spite them. Something hollow opened inside me that night. I looked at the crutches leaning against the wall, the symbol of how fragile I had become, and felt a dread I could not shake. If Evan could rage at me while I was injured, if my parents could blame me while I was healing, if they all saw my suffering as an inconvenience, then what would happen when I finally told them no for real? I did not know the answer then, but soon I would, and it would tear everything open. The weeks leading up to the barbecue felt like living inside a boiling pot that no one bothered to take off the stove. Every day the pressure built a little more. The steam rose a little higher, and the heat pressed against everything inside me until I felt stretched, thin, and brittle. I kept telling myself I could manage it. I had managed everything else, but pressure has a way of finding the weakest point, and when it finally bursts, it does not just break one thing. It destroys everything around it. After Evan's outburst in my apartment, I expected my parents to at least pretend to worry about me. Instead, they doubled down on their narrative. Evan was overwhelmed. Evan was anxious. Evan needed support, and I was failing him. I tried to explain that I could not keep paying his bills while hobbling around on crutches and missing hours at work. My mother pressed her fingers to her forehead as if my words were a personal attack. Mara, Why do you always make things more dramatic than they are? You know your brother is going through a hard time. Be patient with him. Patient. It was the story of my life. My father was worse. He said I should be grateful I had the ability to earn money in the first place. He said people with disabilities should not complain so much. I was not disabled. I was injured, temporarily. But in their eyes, my suffering was not real unless it affected Evan somehow. Everything else was an inconvenience. So when they announced the annual summer barbecue was still happening despite my leg brace and limited mobility, I should not have been surprised. My father insisted it would be a chance for the family to show unity to prove things were fine. My mother said everyone would talk if I did not come. I told them I was not sure I could stand for long. My father waved a hand. "Bring a chair. You will be fine." Bring a chair. As if the pain shooting down my leg every time I shifted weight was simply an attitude problem. The day before the barbecue, Evan showed up at my apartment again. This time, he did not demand money. He just glared at me and said, "You better not embarrass me tomorrow." I asked him what he meant. He shrugged. "Limping around, acting helpless, making everyone feel sorry for you. It is pathetic." If I had not been leaning on my crutch, I might have fallen from the sheer audacity of his words. I wanted to scream. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that his life had been one long list of handouts and excuses all paid for by me. But I said nothing, because silence had become my reflex, my armor, my curse. On the morning of the barbecue, my leg felt worse than usual. The swelling had not gone down, and I struggled to put on the supportive boot the physical therapist recommended. Each tug sent small shards of pain up my calf. I considered calling my parents and telling them I could not make it. The thought lasted 3 seconds. I already knew how the conversation would go. They would accuse me of trying to avoid responsibility. They would say I did not care about the family. They would tell me my injury was half exaggerated anyway. So I went, because for 32 years that is what I always did. I showed up even when it hurt. I complied even when it broke me. I arrived early because my mother told me I should help set up. When I stepped into the backyard, the tables were already arranged, the grill was hot, and the decorations were half hung. My father stood by the grill tongs in one hand, counting the number of burgers out loud. My mother placed silverware in neat rows on a long wooden table. Evan lounged in a folding chair, scrolling through his phone. I hobbled over, leaning on my crutch, trying to hide the grimace each step forced out of me. I asked my mother what she needed help with. She sighed as if my question were annoying. "The napkins. Can you fold them?" I looked at the stack. There were hundreds. I nodded. I moved slowly toward the table. Evan smirked without looking up. "You really are slow." My father did not reprimand him. He laughed. "She has always been dramatic." My chest tightened, not from the brace, from the memories layered on top of each other like sediment. My childhood, my teenage years, my 20s, all the moments where they dismissed my pain because it did not serve them. A few minutes later, while I was still folding napkins, Evan complained loudly that the folding chair he wanted was uncomfortable. My father barked my name. "Mara, give your brother yours. He needs to rest." I stared at him. I was the one with the injured leg. I was the one who struggled to sit and stand. But in my family's hierarchy, my pain ranked below Evan's slightest inconvenience. I switched chairs, because that is what they expected. By noon, relatives started arriving. People greeted Evan with warmth and praise. They told him he looked healthy, mature, responsible. They asked me if my leg was better, but did not wait for the answer. The pressure kept building, the heat rising, the sense that something was about to snap, settling deep in my bones. At one point, while I tried to carry a tray of cups across the yard, Evan brushed past me, deliberately knocking me off balance. My crutch slipped. I caught myself just in time. He smirked and whispered, "Stop pretending you need that thing." A neighbor saw the exchange and frowned, but she said nothing. Everyone said nothing, because the Quinn family had a reputation, and people do not question reputations. They accept them, even when something feels wrong. By mid-afternoon, my leg throbbed so violently I could barely think. I told my mother I needed to sit down. She said fine, but rolled her eyes as if I were a child complaining about boredom. My father announced to everyone that I was being dramatic again. Evan laughed. and something inside me started to buckle. It was the feeling of standing on a floor where the boards are beginning to crack beneath your feet. You do not fall immediately. You first hear the groan, then you feel the shift. Then comes the moment when everything drops. The pressure cooker was reaching its limit, and though I did not know it yet, the explosion was only hours away. When it came, it would be violent. It would be public, and it would change everything. The moment it happened did not feel sudden, even though to everyone watching it probably looked like chaos erupting out of nowhere. For me, it felt like the inevitable breaking point of years of pressure, like a dam that had been cracking one hairline fracture at a time until the final splinter finally gave way. The barbecue was in full swing by late afternoon, plates piled with food, laughter ricocheting between lawn chairs, kids running through sprinklers. It was the kind of scene people take photos of because it looks like happiness. But beneath the sunlight and the noise, I felt a heaviness crawling up my spine. My leg throbbed relentlessly. Every shift of weight sent a wave of heat through my muscles. I tried to stay near the side of the yard where I could sit if I needed to, but my parents kept calling me over with little tasks. Hold this, carry that, take this plate to your uncle. Smile, Mara. Do not limp so much. You are making people uncomfortable. Evan watched me with that expression he always saved for me, the one twisted with contempt and something darker. Every time our eyes met, he smirked like he knew something I did not, as if he were waiting for the right moment to strike. The moment came when I tried to leave early. My leg was screaming, my vision flickering at the edges, and I told my mother I needed to go home and rest. She looked at me with irritation instead of concern. Not yet. People will think something is wrong. I almost laughed. Something was wrong. It had been wrong for years. But before I could respond, Evan walked over close enough that I could smell the cheap beer on his breath. He planted himself in front of me, blocking my path. You are not leaving. I tightened my grip on my crutch. Evan, move. He leaned forward, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Do not pretend you are sick of being here. You are pretending to limp. You want attention. You always want attention. I felt heat rise in my throat, a strained mix of anger and fear, but I kept my voice steady. I am leaving. Move! He snatched the crutch from under my arm before I even registered the movement. My body plunged sideways. The ground came up fast. I hit the grass with a force that rattled my teeth. The air shot out of my lungs in a painful rush. Conversations around us fell off like someone had sliced the sound from the air. For a second, everything was muted except the pounding of my heartbeat. Then, Evan's voice exploded across the yard. Stop pretending, Mara! You are not hurt! Get up! I rolled onto my side, clutching my leg. The pain was sharp, bright, blinding. I tried to push myself up, but my muscles trembled uselessly. Evan stepped closer, holding the crutch in both hands. The metal bar gleamed in the sunlight. He raised it. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, Is she okay? Then the first blow came down. A white flash tore through my body. The sound of metal hitting bone was thick and terrible. I screamed, unable to swallow the sound, even though I tried. The scream did not sound human. It sounded like something breaking. Evan hit me again, this time lower across the tender part of my shin. I curled in on myself trying to shield my leg, but every movement made everything worse. My fingers dug into the grass. My breath came in panicked bursts. I heard murmurs behind me, shifting feet, the unease of people wanting to intervene but not wanting to get involved. Evan lifted the crutch a third time. Through the pounding in my head, I heard my father's voice from the grill. It boomed across the yard with shocking clarity. Hit harder. Maybe she will finally stop faking. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. One woman let out a small cry of protest. My father turned toward her. Mind your business! Evan brought the crutch down again. I felt something pop inside my leg, a sickening give that made bile rise in my throat. My vision blurred. The world slid in and out of focus. Through the haze, I saw faces. Dozens of them. Some horrified, some confused. Some guarded with that look people get when they would rather not see what is right in front of them. No one stepped forward. No one said enough. I tried to crawl away, dragging myself across the grass inch by inch, but Evan followed his steps heavy and furious. "Stand up! Stop lying! Stop making me look like the bad guy!" The crutch slammed into the ground inches from my face, spraying dirt into my eyes. I recoiled, choking on fear and dust. That was when I saw it. A small pulse of red light blinking from the fence. At first, it barely registered. Then I realized what it was. Mr. Brown's ring camera. Recording. The red circle glowed steadily, unwavering, indifferent to the chaos around it. Something inside me flickered. Not strength, not courage. Something smaller. Something that felt like the memory of hope. Evan did not notice the camera. He was too consumed by his anger, too lost in his self-righteousness. He raised the crutch again. My arms lifted instinctively to shield myself. I braced for impact. A voice shouted from somewhere behind my father. "Stop! Stop! Someone call 911!" The crowd finally stirred. Chairs scraped the grass. Footsteps shuffled. Panic spread like a shockwave. Evan hesitated mid-swing, startled by the sudden shift in energy. People were watching now. Really watching. My father shouted something I could not understand over the ringing in my ears. Evan lowered the crutch slowly, his chest heaving, his face flushed with rage and confusion. The spell had broken, but the damage was done. I lay in the grass, gasping, unable to move my body, trembling uncontrollably. The red light from the ring camera blinked steadily, calmly, faithfully. For years I had begged my family to see me, to hear me, to believe me. In the end, the only thing that did was a silent camera on a neighbor's fence. The world around me was a blur of footsteps, voices, shocked murmurs, and the distant ring of someone dialing emergency services, but all I could truly focus on was the pulsing in my leg and that small, steady red light blinking from the fence. It felt unreal that something so tiny could matter in a moment so huge. My body was shaking uncontrollably, my breath shallow and ragged, the grass beneath me damp with either spilled drinks or my own sweat. My ears rang. My vision flickered, and the outline of people standing over me swung in and out of clarity like shadows caught in wind. I heard my mother gasp a sharp, brittle sound, but she did not move toward me. She stood near the drink table, clutching a stack of napkins to her chest as if that might shield her from the truth in front of her. My father still barked orders toward the grill, pretending this was nothing more than a minor disruption. "Do not crowd her. She is fine, always making a fuss." But the crowd did not listen to him the way they usually did. A weight had shifted. The scene had turned too real, too loud, too public. And that camera was still blinking. Recording. Proof. For the first time in years, proof that did not rely on my voice. A pair of shoes appeared beside my face. Old leather work boots, worn at the heels, the kind owned by someone who still fixed things with their hands. I blinked hard to clear my vision, and the tall, weathered shape of my neighbor, Mr. Brown, came into focus. He was 68, quiet, steady, a retired electrician who always waved kindly when he saw me, but never pried into the loud dysfunction of our family. That day, he stepped into the chaos without hesitation. "Mara, sweetheart, do not move." His voice was gentle but firm. I managed a shaky whisper, "Mr. Brown." He crouched beside me, one knee pressing into the grass, his hands trembling slightly as he reached toward me. He did not touch my leg, but he placed his palm lightly on my shoulder to keep me grounded. I saw everything he said quietly, every single thing. His words cracked something inside me, not because they were comforting though they were, but because I understood the full meaning behind them. Someone believed me. Someone saw me. For the first time in so long, I was not screaming into a void. My father stepped forward defensively, puffing out his chest. "This is a family matter, Tom. Stay out of it." Mr. Brown straightened, turning to face him. His voice did not rise, but it carried an authority that silenced the entire yard. "This is not a family matter. This is an assault." The word hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Assault. Not an argument, not sibling drama, not exaggeration. Assault. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably. One woman covered her mouth. A man who had been holding a plate of ribs set it down slowly, his eyes wide. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, she really was hurt." My father's face darkened, but before he could respond, Mr. Brown held up his phone. It was still recording. "I have my Ring camera footage," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. It caught the whole thing. From the moment she fell, from the moment he took the crutch, from the moment he hit her. Evan froze. His entire posture stiffened like a predator suddenly realizing it is the one being hunted. "What footage? What are you talking about?" His voice cracked thin and defensive. Mr. Brown turned the screen toward him briefly. On it, I could hear my own screams echo faintly from the tiny speaker. A couple nearby flinched at the sound. Evan's face drained of color. My father stepped between them. "That camera is pointed at our yard. You are invading our privacy." Mr. Brown shook his head. "It is pointed at my fence line bill. It caught what it caught, and now I am giving it to the police." Those words detonated through the crowd. My mother whispered, "No, no, please, no," as if closing her eyes would make the footage disappear. But it was too late. The truth was out. A few minutes later, sirens grew louder. Not just one set, two, maybe three. People stepped aside as the paramedics pushed through the gate and rushed toward me. One of them knelt and asked me questions I struggled to answer. "Can you feel your toes? Where does it hurt most? How many times were you hit?" I tried to respond, but my voice came out in fragile breaths. The paramedic exchanged a grim look with his partner. They carefully stabilized my leg, immobilized it, and lifted me onto the stretcher. I could hear murmurs around me, shock softening the voices that had earlier laughed or whispered. "She really is hurt." I thought she was exaggerating. "Did you see how hard he hit her?" Someone said I heard the father encourage him. The father. Not Dad. Not Bill. The father. Something about hearing that shift made my stomach twist. Evan tried to approach me as they secured the straps on the stretcher. "Mara, come on, tell them it is not that bad. Tell them you fell wrong." I turned my head away. The paramedic blocked him. "Sir, step back now." My father tried to intervene. "She does not need a hospital. She needs to stop causing problems." The older paramedic turned to him with an expression that held no patience for cruelty. "Sir, she has visible injuries, and we were informed by the caller that there is video evidence. The police will handle it." Police. The word rippled through the crowd like a cold wind. Mr. Brown walked beside the stretcher as they carried me toward the ambulance. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You are not alone anymore, sweetheart. I sent the footage to the police already. They are on their way." My eyes stung. I was too weak to cry, too overwhelmed to speak. But something in me unclenched for the first time in months. Maybe years. The last thing I saw before the ambulance doors closed was the red Ring camera light still shining across the yard like a tiny, unwavering witness. It was impossible to know then, but that little light would change everything. The ambulance felt both too loud and too quiet at the same time. The siren wailed above me, yet inside the cabin, every sound was muffled as if my brain were wrapped in cotton. The paramedic beside me kept reading my vitals, adjusting oxygen flow, asking questions that floated somewhere just out of my reach. I tried to answer, but my voice drifted thin and distant, like it belonged to someone lying miles away. All I could truly feel was the throbbing in my leg, the ache spreading in waves through my body, and the cold, creeping dread that had lived inside my ribcage for years, but never felt sharper than it did now. I stared at the metal ceiling of the ambulance as it rattled along the road, each bump sending a new jolt of pain through me. I kept thinking about the red blinking camera light clinging to it like a rope in the dark. It was the only thing grounding me. The only proof that this time what happened to me was not going to be rewritten by my parents or twisted by Evan. This time, the truth was documented. When we reached the emergency room, the paramedics wheeled me inside, calling out my condition to the nurses. Words like possible fracture, repeated blunt force trauma swelling, and extensive bruising floated above me like fragmented pieces of someone else's nightmare. A nurse with kind eyes leaned over me and said, "We are going to take good care of you. You are safe now." Safe. I did not realize how foreign that word felt until she said it. They moved quickly, lifting me onto a hospital bed, cutting away the fabric around my leg, shining lights on the swelling, the discoloration, the tender points that made me gasp when touched. A doctor walked in, tall, calm, with a voice that cut through the haze. "Mara, I am Dr. Alvarez. I am going to examine your leg and run some tests. Can you tell me what happened?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat tightened. My eyes burned. I tried again. My brother. He hit me. With my crutch. The words sounded unreal when spoken aloud, like I was quoting someone else's story. Dr. Alvarez's expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. A flicker of concern that told me he was taking every word seriously. "How many times did he hit you?" I shook my head weakly. "I do not know. 5, maybe more." He nodded and continued examining my leg, his fingers gentle but methodical. When he pressed on one area near my shin, a sharp scream tore out of me before I could hold it back. "I am sorry," he said quickly. "That reaction tells me a lot. We are going to get X-rays and possibly an MRI. I want to make sure nothing is torn beyond repair." As they wheeled me toward imaging, I heard him speaking to a nurse behind me. "Multiple patterned contusions. That bruise along the thigh looks older, the smaller marks near the ankle, too." My stomach dropped. I had forgotten about the earlier bruises, the ones I dismissed as clumsiness or accidental bumps, the ones Evan caused during previous outbursts. I had never told anyone the real source of those injuries, but Dr. Alvarez saw everything. When the imaging was done and they brought me back to the room, Dr. Alvarez returned with a clipboard and a steady gaze. "Mara, I am going to ask some direct questions, and it is important you answer honestly." I nodded, though my hands trembled. He began gently. "Has anyone in your home ever hurt you before today?" The room felt too bright, the ceiling too white, my heartbeat too loud. "Yes, my brother. Sometimes. And your parents. Have they ever encouraged or dismissed the violence?" My voice cracked. "They always defend him. They say I am exaggerating. They said today I was faking." Dr. Alvarez sat down next to the bed, lowering himself to eye level. "Mara, what happened to you today is not just an assault. Given what you described and the history your injuries suggest, this may fall under domestic violence and possibly financial exploitation." I stared at him, the words ringing in my ears. Domestic violence, financial exploitation. Terms I had heard seen on pamphlets, glanced past on billboards, but never imagined applying to me. He continued, his tone firm but compassionate. "Because of the nature of your injuries and what you disclosed, I am required by law to file a report with Adult Protective Services. They will contact law enforcement. You will not have to do this alone." My breath shuddered. For years, I had carried everything alone. The financial burdens, the emotional weight, the quiet fear that simmered whenever Evan's anger rose. Now, a stranger was telling me I did not have to carry it anymore. A nurse entered with warm blankets and placed one gently over my legs, careful not to touch the injured areas. She squeezed my hand. "We believe you." Those 3 words shattered something deep inside me and rebuilt it at the same time. No one in my family had ever believed me. Not once. They believed Evan's excuses. They believed whatever version of events protected their illusion of the perfect son. But here in this room, among people who had known me for less than an hour, I was believed without hesitation. A police officer arrived a short time later. Officer Ramirez introduced herself in a calm, even tone and asked if I felt up to giving a statement. I nodded. She sat beside my bed and patiently walked me through every detail, every blow, every insult, every moment of fear I had tried to bury. When I struggled, she waited. When I faltered, she encouraged gently. She never rushed me. When I finished, she said, "We already have the video. Mr. Brown forwarded it to our station. It is very clear what happened." For the first time since the beating began, my lungs filled with air that did not burn. There would be no rewriting, no gaslighting, no family narrative twisting the truth. The footage existed. The truth existed. And now, for the first time in my life, the system was on my side. As I lay back against the pillow, exhausted but strangely lighter, Dr. Alvarez stepped in one more time. "Get some rest, Mara. You are safe here. And tomorrow we start planning the next steps. Tomorrow, the future. A future where I was no longer invisible. A future where what happened to me mattered. For the first time in years, I let myself believe it might truly be possible." The next morning, after a restless night in the ER observation bay, I was moved to a quiet room where the blinds filtered in a soft, gray Denver light. My leg was wrapped, elevated and throbbing in a steady pulse that reminded me with every beat what had happened. A nurse brought breakfast that I barely touched, and for hours I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of carts rolling intercom announcements and the muted chatter of nurses exchanging shift notes. I kept checking the time without knowing why. Maybe a part of me expected a call from my parents, a gentle voice asking if I was all right. But I knew better. Silence was their language whenever I broke the illusion they wanted to maintain. Early afternoon, Officer Ramirez returned. She stepped into the room holding a tablet and a manila folder, her expression professional but softened with a touch of empathy. "Mara, we executed the welfare check and follow up this morning based on your statement and the video provided." I sat up straighter, my heart thumping. "And—" She pulled up the file on her tablet, tapping the screen. "We arrived at your parents' house around 9:30. She paused. "I think you should know what happened." The scene unfolded in her words like a movie I had been waiting my entire life to see. She described how she and another officer walked up the front path leading to the familiar porch of my childhood home. The morning sun lit the lawn where yesterday's footprints still marked the dry grass, as if the violence had left an imprint no rake could smooth out. My father opened the door first, still wearing the same faded grill apron from the barbecue, as if nothing had happened. He looked annoyed, not concerned, as the officers introduced themselves. According to Ramirez, his very first words were, "If this is about my daughter's little performance, we have nothing to talk about." My stomach rolled. I could hear his dismissive tone perfectly. The officers requested that both he and Evan come outside. My father refused, arguing that anything they had to say could be said from the doorway. When they insisted, he threw up his hands dramatically and stepped onto the porch, muttering about the world going soft. Evan eventually appeared behind him, looking hungover and irritated, rubbing at his temple like he had a headache rather than a guilty conscience. Ramirez continued her retelling. "We informed them that we had video evidence of the assault." At that, Evan stiffened. "My father tried to cut us off, saying families fight kids, overreact, nothing worth legal trouble. Then we told them the video captured your father encouraging the assault." I closed my eyes as the weight of her words settled. Encouraging. Not just standing by. Not just ignoring. Encouraging. What happened then? Evan tried to deny everything. He said you provoked him, that he just defended himself, that you exaggerated because you always needed attention. My chest tightened, anger and sadness braided together. Ramirez's voice stayed steady. Then we informed him that the footage clearly contradicted his claims. Both officers witnessed a shift in their demeanor. Your father grew agitated and stepped close to me. He said, "This stays in the family. You cannot arrest us for family business." Her next words were sharp. We informed him that in the state of Colorado, assault is a crime regardless of relation. Encouraging violence is a crime. Financial exploitation of a dependent injured adult is also a crime. My breath hitched. Dependent injured adult. It was a legal term, but it struck deep as a truth I had tried for years to hide. What did they do? My father shouted. Specifically, he shouted about you ruining everything. He said you were dramatic. He said you always wanted to embarrass the family. He told the officers to go arrest someone who deserved it. I felt heat rising behind my eyes, but I forced myself to stay still. And Evan, he tried to push past us to go back inside. At that point, we detained him. She paused. "Mara, your father attempted to interfere. That alone could have been an additional charge." My pulse raced. What happened next? She reached into the manila folder and handed me a document. Arrest reports. Evan is in custody pending charges for assault with a weapon felony, domestic violence, and intimidation. Your father is detained for reckless endangerment and encouraging violence toward a vulnerable adult. My throat tightened. I had imagined justice before, but always as a distant fantasy. Something that happened to other people in stories written by stronger women than me. Hearing it spoken aloud felt unreal, like the world had tilted and finally aligned in a way I had never experienced. Ramirez continued. They will be transferred for booking this afternoon. There will be a hearing. You will likely need to provide additional statements, but you already did the hardest part. For a long moment, I could not speak. I stared at the arrest reports, my hands trembling. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part felt hollow, as if years of pain had been tied tightly inside me and someone finally cut the string open. Officer Ramirez placed a calm hand on the railing of my bed. Mara, I want you to understand something. What happened to you is not your fault. You showed courage coming forward. Many people never get to this point, not because they are weak, but because they are alone. You were not alone this time. The ring camera. Mr. Brown. Dr. Alvarez. The words washed over me like warm water on cold skin. For so long I had been conditioned to believe that speaking up made me the problem, that pain only counted if someone else validated it, that Evan's anger was something I somehow deserved and my father's dismissal was something I simply had to endure. But now, the truth had a voice louder than theirs. Evidence. Law. Justice. I whispered, "Thank you." It felt small compared to what she deserved to hear, but it was all my trembling voice could manage. Ramirez stood and nodded. "Rest. We will be back with updates." When she left, I lay back and closed my eyes. The pain in my leg throbbed with each heartbeat, but it no longer felt like the defining force of my body. The silence around me no longer felt suffocating. For the first time in my life, the people who hurt me were facing consequences. They could not twist it. They could not bury it. They could not blame me. Not this time. The police knock on their door had echoed all the way into my hospital room, and it sounded like the beginning of freedom. The first call came less than an hour after Officer Ramirez left my hospital room. My phone buzzed on the tray beside me, the screen lighting up with a name I recognized instantly, even though I wished I did not. Aunt Linda. I let it ring. It stopped, then started again, and again. On the fourth call, the buzzing felt like a drill burrowing into my skull, so I finally answered. The moment I said hello, her voice exploded through the speaker. "What on earth did you do? Mara, do you have any idea what you have started?" She did not ask if I was alive. She did not ask why I was in the hospital, only what trouble I caused. I kept my voice level. Evan assaulted me. There is a video. The police saw it. Her scoff was sharp enough to cut. "Oh, please. You know how boys get when they are stressed, and your father is beside himself. You humiliated him in front of half the neighborhood." My grip tightened on the phone. I wanted to hang up. Instead, I said, "He cheered while Evan beat me." Linda's gasp was theatrical. "Do not you dare say that about your father. He loves you more than anyone. He was grilling burgers while my brother hit me with my own crutch." Linda ignored that part completely, launching into a dramatic sigh. "Families fight. This is a private matter. You should have never involved the police." My throat tightened. I did not involve the police. A neighbor did. She paused long enough that I pictured her blinking in confusion. Then she said, "Well, you should have told the police you did not want charges." I closed my eyes. That is not how felony assault works. She exhaled sharply, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Your brother is sitting in a jail cell, Mara. Do you feel good about that?" I hung up without another word. The next call came from another aunt, then a cousin, then two more cousins in a group chat. They all had the same script. Evan did something bad, but did it really have to go this far? Why couldn't you just forgive him? Do you realize this could ruin his life? Why are you making the family look crazy? Not one of them asked about my injuries. Not one asked if I could walk. Not one asked if I felt safe. By the 5th call, the numbness in my chest began to ache. By the 7th, my hands trembled. By the 10th, I could barely breathe. Then the worst call came. Mom. Just seeing her name on the screen made my stomach clench. I answered because I always answered even when I knew I should not. Her voice was quiet, strained. Baby, what did you do? Something inside me cracked. I said, Mom, I was assaulted. Are you really asking me that? She sighed, the kind of sigh that told me she was already exhausted with me. Your brother is terrified. He says the police are twisting everything. He says you are exaggerating again. Again. The word hit like a slap. I wanted to scream. Instead, my voice went flat. Did he tell you he knocked me to the ground? Did he tell you he hit me until I collapsed? Did he tell you Dad yelled at him to keep going? Silence. For a moment, I wondered if she heard me at all. Then she whispered, He is your brother. He needs help. This could ruin him. I blinked at the ceiling, stunned at how familiar the words felt. A lifetime of them. Evan needs you. Evan depends on you. Evan cannot manage without you. Evan is struggling. Be patient. Be kind. Be understanding. Be quiet. I said I could have died. She hesitated. Then she said softly, Please do not press charges. Just come home and we can sort this out as a family. I almost laughed. The sound came out sharp, humorless. I am not coming home, she inhaled sharply. Your father is furious. He says he will never forget this. That was the moment I felt something shift inside me. Something old, something heavy, something that had been waiting years for me to acknowledge it. I said calmly, Maybe that is for the best. She gasped as if I had struck her. Mara, do not say things you cannot take back. I wanted to tell her that she and Dad had spent my entire life saying things they would never take back. The difference was that my words came from survival. Theirs came from preference. I ended the call without saying goodbye. My phone buzzed again seconds later. Then again. My cousins flooded the family group chat with messages ranging from passive-aggressive to outright hostile. You know Evan has always had anger problems. Why provoke him? He is your little brother. You are supposed to protect him. Dad says you are doing this for attention. If you had just given him the money, none of this would have happened. I tossed the phone onto the blanket as if it were burning me. I pressed my palms to my eyes, shaking. I had known the backlash was coming, but knowing did not make it hurt less. Betrayal always hurts even when it is predictable. A soft knock on the door pulled me back. Nurse Emily stepped in carrying fresh water and a gentle expression. You have had a lot of calls, she said carefully. I nodded, swallowing the rising ache. Families can be complicated. Her understatement nearly made me laugh. She took a slow breath. If any of them speak to you in a way that makes you feel unsafe, you can tell the charge nurse. We can limit calls. Hearing that made something inside me unravel. I nodded again, unable to speak. She placed the water on the table, then said quietly, I want you to remember something. People who love you do not disappear when you need them, and they do not blame you for surviving. When she left, I stared at the door long after it closed. My family had just shown me exactly who they were. Not protectors, not supporters, not even bystanders. They were defenders of the very violence that broke me, and I finally knew with chilling clarity that the only way forward was without them. The hospital room had grown still by the time evening settled in the sky outside, fading from gray to a muted lavender. The television played quietly somewhere down the hallway, and the rhythmic beeping of monitors blended into a soft, predictable hum. I had silenced my phone hours earlier, unable to bear another voicemail dripping with disappointment, accusation, or guilt. For the first time all day, I could breathe without bracing for another emotional blow. When a knock sounded at the door, I expected a nurse or Officer Ramirez with another batch of forms. Instead, a woman stepped inside with a leather briefcase and a stride that carried both confidence and purpose. She wore a navy blazer, her dark hair pulled into a neat clip, her expression focused yet gentle. Mara Quinn. I nodded, unsure whether to be nervous or relieved. She extended her hand. I am Lisa Donnelly. I was contacted by your neighbor, Mr. Brown. He said you might need someone who specializes in cases like yours. My chest tightened at the mention of Mr. Brown. Even after witnessing something traumatic, he was still thinking of me. Lisa pulled a chair to my bedside and sat down, resting her briefcase on her lap. Before we talk strategy, I need to hear what happened, from you, in your own words. I had repeated the story so many times already to nurses, to doctors, to police officers. But something about the way she said it patiently, respectfully made the words feel different. I told her everything. I described the barbecue, Evan's rage, the weight of the crutch slamming down on my leg again and again, my father cheering him on like it was a sport. I described the years of financial pressure, the constant guilt tactics, the medical bills I paid for Evan because my parents insisted he needed help and I could afford it. I described how I crashed my car from exhaustion, how they asked about Evan's car payment before asking if I was alive. When I finished, Lisa sat silently for a long moment. She did not look shocked. She looked furious on my behalf in a controlled, lethal sort of way. "Mara," she said, finally tugging a file from her briefcase, "I need you to understand the severity of what they did." I tried to hold her gaze, but my eyes wavered. She opened the file and began listing items in a calm, lawyerly tone. First, the assault. That alone is a criminal offense. Your brother used a crutch, which under Colorado law qualifies as an improvised weapon. That makes it aggravated. She flipped a page. Second, the repeated past injuries described by your doctor indicate a history of physical harm. Third, your father encouraging violence elevates his involvement from passive neglect to active endangerment. My fingers curled around the blanket knuckles, whitening. She was not done. Fourth, the financial dependence they forced on you qualifies as exploitation. You were injured, overworked, and still expected to support an adult sibling while they contributed nothing. That is financial abuse. And finally, emotional manipulation, coercion, and ongoing intimidation. All of these fall under the umbrella of domestic violence. I swallowed the word heavy and unfamiliar in a way that made my skin prickle. Domestic violence was something I associated with romantic partners, not families like mine. Lisa saw the confusion in my expression. Domestic violence does not only apply to spouses. It covers harm and coercion within a household, including between adult siblings and parents who protect the abuser. She leaned forward slightly. What happened to you is not a family argument. It is a pattern of abuse. I inhaled sharply. No one had ever said those words to me so plainly. Not nurses, not relatives, not anyone in my life. Lisa reached for another document. The police video corroborates your story. It captures your brother assaulting you and your father encouraging it. There is no ambiguity, no interpretation that favors them. I exhaled slowly, the truth settling into my bones. You are not at fault. Lisa spoke with a measured calm that carried the weight of legal authority. They groomed you to believe you owed them everything, that you were responsible for Evan's failures, and the moment you set boundaries, they punished you physically, financially, and emotionally. She sat back. I specialize in these cases, Mara. And let me be perfectly clear. You have grounds to pursue both criminal and civil action. A civil lawsuit would allow you to seek restitution for medical costs, lost wages, emotional damages, and long-term therapy expenses. I blinked, stunned. A civil lawsuit? I had never even considered it. I had spent years internalizing their needs, solving their problems, paying their bills, contorting myself to meet their expectations. Imagining them held accountable felt surreal, almost dangerous, like touching fire. Lisa opened her briefcase again. I drafted preliminary paperwork. Nothing binding yet, but I want you to see what your options are. She slid the papers toward me. My hands shook as I lifted the first page. Seeing the words "complaint for damages" with my name printed on it felt like stepping into a parallel universe. One where I mattered. One where the harm done to me had weight. One where someone finally said enough. Lisa noticed the tremor in my fingers. Mara, you do not have to decide anything tonight. But I want you to know that legal consequences are not about revenge. They are about protection. They are about making sure you never have to live through something like this again. I whispered. They will hate me. She answered without hesitation. They already do, because you stopped being their resource and started being a person. The truth was painful. It was also liberating. Lisa stood and gathered her things. "I will be back tomorrow. And Mara." Her eyes softened. "You survived something horrific. Now it is time to reclaim your life." When she left, the hospital room felt different, brighter somehow. Not because the pain was gone, it still pulsed through my leg, sharp and persistent, but because a door had opened inside me. For the first time, I saw a path out. Not a dream, not a fantasy, a real tangible path with laws and evidence and people who believed me. A lawyer had called it abuse, and saying it aloud made it undeniably, irrevocably real. I woke the next morning to the kind of buzzing that made my stomach twist before I even opened my eyes. It was not from my phone this time. It was from the hospital hallway, from the ER nurses whispering with a mix of shock and fascination, from the soft hum of voices that rose whenever someone passed my door. Something was different. The air felt charged, almost electric. Nurse Emily entered my room carrying breakfast and wearing an expression I could not read. Not pity, not worry. Something sharper. Something like disbelief mixed with a kind of fierce protectiveness. "Mara," she said carefully, "I think you need to turn your phone back on." My chest tightened. I had silenced it the day before, sick of drowning in messages from relatives more concerned with family image than my broken body. Now anxiety crawled up my spine as I reached for the phone. The moment the screen lit up, dozens of notifications flooded in, missed calls. Hundreds of text messages, and alerts from Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, and even Nextdoor. My pulse quickened. What happened? Before Emily could answer, the phone buzzed again with a message from Naomi. "You need to sit down before you look. I already was." But her text still made my breath hitch. Another message came through instantly. "The video is everywhere." I clicked her link and the world shifted. It was the Ring camera footage, clear, close, brutally undeniable. Evan towering over me, my crutch raised in his fists. The sickening moment he struck me. The second, the third, the fourth hit. The way I screamed, the way my body crumpled. Then my father's voice, loud and chilling, hit harder. "Maybe she will stop faking." Gasps came from off-screen. Someone yelled for him to stop. Another person unseen whispered, "Oh my God." Then it ended. The video had millions of views. Millions. The caption on the repost that had gone viral read, "Disabled woman brutally attacked by her own brother while father encourages it." Colorado police investigating. I stared at the screen, my hand clasped over my mouth. Emily stepped closer, her voice soft. "People saw the truth, Mara. They are furious." I scrolled through the comments. Thousands of them. "This is monstrous. Arrest the father too. How can a parent cheer on something like this? She deserves justice." I would have tackled that man myself. Protect disabled women. Protect survivors. My chest tightened at every message. I had spent my entire life invisible to my family, silenced, dismissed, accused of exaggeration. Now strangers across the country saw me clearly. They believed me without hesitation. The phone buzzed again. Naomi calling. The moment I answered, her voice burst through the speaker. "Girl, are you okay? I do not even know what okay means right now. They are calling it the most horrifying thing they have seen on a Ring camera. It is everywhere. Facebook, Nextdoor, Twitter, Reddit, even TikTok." Someone slowed the audio so the father's voice is clearer. There was a long pause, and then she whispered, "People are demanding your dad be charged too." My breath caught. When she continued, her voice was steadier, protective. "I need you to know something. They are on your side. For once, everyone is on your side." Reports began pouring in, news outlets picking it up, disability advocates sharing it, domestic violence organizations commenting on it. The story had burst free from the private cage my family always kept me in. They could not contain it, could not spin it, could not bury it. By noon, Naomi messaged again. "Evan got fired." I blinked. "He got what?" "Fired," she repeated. "His part-time job saw the video. They put out a statement, something about zero tolerance for violence." My breathing steadied for a moment before the next message arrived. And your dad. I stiffened. What about him? His church removed him from the volunteer list. They said his behavior does not align with their values. And someone commented saying they saw him yelling outside the house when the police took Evan. It is a mess over there. A hollow feeling settled in my chest. Not joy, not triumph. Something quieter. Something like the slow realization that consequences were finally landing where they belonged. For years, I had shouldered the fallout of Evan's actions, paid his bills, smoothed over his tantrums, restored his broken things, survived his rage, absorbed the blame. Now, for the first time, he was facing the weight of his choices, and my father was not shielded by the myth of the good provider or the charming host. The world saw him as he truly was, a man who encouraged violence against his own daughter. I spent the afternoon scrolling numb and overwhelmed. Messages poured in from strangers. I am so sorry this happened to you. You are strong. You did not deserve this. I was hurt by my family too. Thank you for speaking up. Do you need support? Here is a resource. Here is a hotline. Here is a disability advocacy group. People shared their own stories, their own bruises, their own nights spent hiding from someone who claimed to love them. In the sea of digital voices, one comment stood out. It was from a woman named Teresa. She wrote, "My mother always defended my abusive brother. I spent years thinking I imagined the abuse because she convinced me I was dramatic. Seeing your video made me realize it was not my fault. I found myself crying before I understood I was crying. My tears fell onto the hospital blanket, hot and relentless. Emily stepped inside just then and paused, worry softening her features. Are you all right? I nodded through tears. Someone said my story helped them. She smiled gently. Then maybe something good can come from something terrible. She left me with warm blankets and time to breathe. That night, as the hospital lights dimmed and the hallway quieted, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Officer Ramirez. Update, she wrote. The district attorney is reviewing the video. Additional charges for your father are likely. My heart thudded in a slow, stunned rhythm. For years, justice felt like a fantasy reserved for people braver than me. Now it was happening. Loudly, publicly, unavoidably. And for the first time in my life, the world was not laughing at my pain. They were demanding accountability for it. I was discharged from the hospital late the next morning with my leg still wrapped a pair of crutches the staff insisted I use and a stack of paperwork detailing follow-up care. Every step hurt, but it was nothing compared to the ache running through my chest. As Naomi helped me into her car, I felt like the world outside had shifted while I lay in that hospital bed. The air felt heavier. The sky felt sharper. Even the sunlight seemed to sting in a way it never had before. On the ride to the police station where I needed to finalize my written statement and provide authorization for the district attorney's office to use my medical records, Naomi kept glancing at me as if checking to make sure I would not fall apart. You do not have to be strong every second, she said gently. I nodded but did not answer. It was not strength keeping me upright. It was momentum. The kind that carried you forward because going back was no longer an option. The police station loomed ahead with its brick exterior and tall glass doors that reflected the pale Denver morning. Naomi parked and helped me out of the car, steadying me as I hobbled forward one painful step at a time. Inside, a quiet hum filled the lobby. Papers, shuffling phones, ringing officers moving briskly through hallways. I felt small and exposed, like walking into the aftermath of my own life. Officer Ramirez greeted us near the front desk, her expression softening the moment she saw me. Mara, take your time. I followed her into a private interview room. The lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the laminated table felt too clean, too cold. She set a stack of forms in front of me. These confirm your cooperation with the investigation and allow us to access your medical and therapy records. I signed slowly, my hand trembling more than I wanted it to. Naomi stood behind me, her hand lightly pressing my shoulder in silent reassurance. When I finished signing, Ramirez gathered the papers. Good. The DA will proceed immediately. And then she hesitated just a fraction. There is something you need to know. My breath caught. What? She exhaled. Your father and brother were brought in for processing earlier this morning. They are still here. My pulse jolted hard enough to make my vision blur for a second. Here, in this building. Ramirez continued in that calm, steady tone that pressed meaning into every syllable. They do not know you are coming in today, but I thought it is better to tell you than have you walk into them unexpectedly. My mouth went dry. What are the chances I will see them? Before she could answer, raised voices echoed from the hallway beyond the door. Angry, frantic, male. My skin prickled. Naomi leaned in close, whispering, "We can leave. You do not have to do this today." But something in me hardened, something quiet and resolute. "No," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my own voice. "I am not running from them anymore." Ramirez nodded once approvingly. "Stay here. Let me check what is happening." She stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her. The voices outside sharpened. One of them unmistakably Evan's raw and vicious. "This is ridiculous. I want to call someone. I want my phone. I want a lawyer." Another voice, my father's. Rough, bitter. All because of her. She always ruins everything. The floor felt like it tilted under me. Naomi knelt beside my chair, steadying my knee with both hands. "Breathe. You do not owe them anything. You owe yourself peace." The door opened abruptly. Ramirez re-entered. Her face was composed, but her eyes held a flicker of something like warning. "They are being moved to holding, but they are refusing to cooperate. You are safe. They will not come in here." Before I could exhale in relief, a commotion erupted directly outside the room. Footsteps, raised voices, the rattling of handcuffs. And suddenly, as Ramirez turned to close the door again, the gap in the doorway revealed a flash of movement. Evan. He was being led down the hall in cuffs, 2 officers gripping his arms as he tried to twist toward the room. His face flushed red, his eyes wild. The moment he saw me sitting there, he lost what little control he had left. "This is your fault." His voice ripped down the corridor like a blade. "You ruined my life. Do you hear me? You ruined everything." The officers shoved him forward, but he fought to look back. "You think anyone cares about you. You think this makes you right. You think you won." And then from behind him came my father's voice, dripping with a venom I had not heard fully directed at me before. "You made a mistake turning on your family. Do not think the world will save you." The words hit me like a physical blow. But then, something strange happened. I did not cry. I did not panic. I did not curl into myself the way I had so many times before. Instead, I went still. Very still. And for the first time in my life, their rage sounded small, weak, pathetic. 2 men, once so powerful in shaping my world, now reduced to shouting through handcuffs and police escorts. Ramirez stepped fully into the doorway, blocking their view of me. "That is enough. Move them to holding. Now!" The officers pulled them away, their voices fading down the hall. When silence finally settled again, Ramirez turned to me. "I am sorry you had to hear that." I inhaled deeply. No. I needed to, because hearing them stripped of control, stripped of excuses, stripped of the facade they always hid behind, it made something inside me settle. Like a puzzle piece finally falling into place. I whispered, "They cannot hurt me anymore." Ramirez nodded. "They cannot." Naomi exhaled shakily, wiping her eyes. Seeing them like that. Mara, they looked powerless. I rose slowly, leaning on my crutches, my leg throbbing, but my spine straight. "Let's finish the paperwork," I said. "I want to move forward." And as we stepped deeper into the station, away from the echoes of their fury, I realized something profound. This was not just a confrontation. It was a turning point. The moment I stopped being afraid of the people who raised me. Leaving the police station felt like stepping out of a storm cellar after a tornado. The wind was still the sky clear, but inside me everything was overturned, broken, and rearranged. Naomi helped me into the passenger seat of her car, her movements slow and gentle, as if she knew I was holding myself together by a thread. My leg throbbed with each heartbeat, but the pain felt different now. less like something that defined me and more like something I was finally allowed to heal from. As we drove toward my apartment, the world outside the window looked unfamiliar. The crisp Colorado air, the families walking dogs, the people sipping coffee outside small cafes. All of it looked like a life I had been watching through glass for years. A life that did not include panic, guilt, or obligation. A life I was finally feeling close enough to touch. When we reached my apartment, Naomi helped me inside and settled me on the couch with blankets, pillows, and the kind of fussing only someone who truly loves you bothers to give. "You need to rest," she said, filling a glass with water and setting it beside me. "Promise me you will try." I nodded. Rest, a simple request. But rest was something I had never been allowed to have. Not growing up, not during my adulthood, not when I worked 3 jobs to keep Evan afloat. Not when exhaustion sent me into a car crash that almost ended my life. My rest had never been important, only my usefulness. Naomi left for work that evening, promising to return with dinner. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, my apartment felt unnervingly quiet. But it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not lonely, not empty, just mine. I looked around the space. Clean, soft, safe. My home. Not my parents' house. Not a place filled with Evans yelling my father's judgment, my mother's excuses. A place free of the weight I had carried so long it felt like part of my spine. I sat on the couch for a long moment, letting the quiet sink into my bones. Then I closed my eyes and allowed myself to feel everything I had been holding back. Fear, relief, trembling anger. Exhaustion so deep it felt woven into my muscles. And something else, something small, something new, hope. Later that afternoon, after a long nap and 2 pain medications, I picked up my phone and opened a blank note. I did not know why. I just knew my chest felt heavy with words I had never spoken aloud. Before I realized what I was doing, I began typing. About the barbecue, about the beating, about the years before it. The money, the guilt, the way my father told me to be grateful for the privilege of supporting my brother, the way my mother taught me to shrink myself to keep the peace, the way Evan grew used to taking and taking until the day I finally said no and he snapped. I wrote until my fingers cramped, until tears blurred the screen, until the shaking in my shoulders eased into calm. When I finally stopped, I stared at the long stretch of text, raw, unfiltered, mine. I had no intention of posting it anywhere. I had written it for myself, but typing those words cracked open a door I had kept locked for decades. For the first time, I felt like the narrator of my own life rather than a character controlled by someone else. The next morning, Naomi returned with breakfast and a small potted plant with pink flowers. "Thought your place needed something alive," she said. I laughed for the first time in days. She sat beside me, expression shifting to something more serious. "I know this is overwhelming, but you are doing everything right, every single step." I nodded, though uncertainty tugged at me. It did not feel like I was doing things right. It felt like I was learning to walk in a new world on shaky legs. That afternoon, the physical therapist from my post-surgical team called to schedule home visits. We set the first appointment for the next day. When I hung up, Naomi nudged my shoulder. "You are building something new, one brick at a time." And she was right. The next few days passed in small, fragile victories, learning to move without bracing for another blow, waking without dread tightening my chest, letting myself enjoy silence, eating meals slowly instead of rushing to prepare dinners for people who barely noticed my effort. On the 3rd day, I stepped into the kitchen to make coffee. My body ached, but something about the act felt symbolic. I moved slowly, steadying myself on my crutches, and when I finally poured the coffee into my favorite mug, a warm ache spread through me. A simple task, an ordinary moment, but it felt like a declaration. I am here. I am alive. I am choosing myself. That evening, the physical therapist arrived, a woman named Sandra with sharp eyes and a warm voice. She examined my leg, reviewed my scans, and outlined a plan designed not just to heal the new injuries, but to rebuild what had been damaged long before the barbecue. "Your body has been carrying more weight than it was meant to," she said gently. You need to learn how to let go of burdens that are not yours." She meant physical burden, but her words landed deeper. After she left, I whispered to an empty room, "I am trying." And I meant it. Over the next week, I deleted the family group chat, blocked the relatives who bullied me, blocked my parents after the 5th voicemail begging me to drop the charges, changed the passcode on my phone, and each time I pressed delete or block, something loosened inside me, something unlatched, something unshackled. One night, I stepped out onto my apartment balcony and stared at the Denver skyline washed in orange by the setting sun. The air smelled crisp, the world felt wide, and the silence felt full instead of empty. For the first time in my entire life, I felt like I had stepped out of a cage I did not realize I had lived in. Breaking free was painful. Breaking free was terrifying. Breaking free was necessary, and I was finally doing it. The courthouse smelled like old paper, cold air, and nerves. Even before I stepped through the metal detectors, my palms were sweating around the grips of my crutches. Naomi walked beside me close enough that our shoulders brushed, steadying me without touching me, respecting the strange mix of strength and fragility I had been living in since the attack. The building loomed over us, stone and steel, against a Colorado sky so blue it almost looked fake. This was the day everything would be laid bare. The video, the years of enabling, the violence, the lies. And for the first time, my family would face consequences they could not bully, shame, or manipulate their way out of. Inside the courtroom, people shuffled into hard wooden benches. Some whispered. Some pretended not to look at me even though I felt their eyes like heat on my skin. A courtroom deputy pointed us to a row near the front, and I lowered myself carefully into the seat, adjusting my injured leg. My heart thudded so loudly, I wondered if everyone around me could hear it. Then the door on the left side of the room opened, and Evan shuffled in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. He looked smaller, paler, his hair unwashed, his face drawn tight with fear and anger. For a moment, he scanned the room. Then his gaze landed on me, and his expression snapped into something venomous. Contempt mixed with disbelief that I dared to show up. Dad entered next, escorted by another officer, though he was not cuffed. His face was set in the same expression he wore whenever the world did not bend to his will. A blend of irritation, indignation, and self-pity. He spotted me too, his gaze narrowing with something close to hatred. I braced myself. Not physically, but emotionally. As if preparing for a wave I knew would hit whether I was ready or not. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The room settled into a tense silence. The judge, a calm-faced woman with silver-rimmed glasses, wasted no time. "We are here for preliminary hearings in the matter of State of Colorado versus Evan Quinn and State of Colorado versus Richard Quinn." She adjusted her glasses and looked first at Evan. "Charges include aggravated assault with a weapon felony, domestic violence, intimidation, and harassment." Evan shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. His public defender touched his arm silently, telling him not to speak. Then the judge turned to my father. "Charges include reckless endangerment, aiding and abetting an assault, and verbal encouragement of violence against a vulnerable adult." Dad scoffed loudly, shaking his head as if this entire proceeding were beneath him. The judge did not so much as blink. "Counsel, please present evidence." Lisa rose from the front row, dressed in a charcoal suit that made her look even sharper, more formidable than she had in the hospital room. She walked with absolute confidence to the center of the courtroom. "Your Honor, the state will present Exhibit A." She nodded to the technician, a screen lowered from the ceiling. My breath caught in my throat. I had not prepared myself to see it again. The video. The ring camera footage, a blurry perspective at first, then sharpened. The yard, the laughter. Evan's rage approaching me. The crutch raised, the first blow, the second. My scream, my collapse, my father's voice, hit harder. A ripple went through the room. Gasps. One woman in the back covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Jesus Christ." But there were no laughs, no excuses, no doubts. The truth was loud, undeniable, and broadcast in humiliating clarity. When the video ended, the silence felt like a living thing. Lisa stepped forward again. "Your Honor, we also have medical records confirming significant soft tissue damage. recurring blunt force trauma patterns consistent with long-term abuse and testimony from medical professionals who treated the victim. She glanced toward me briefly, her eyes steady, grounding me. Additionally, we have text messages showing financial coercion over several years and statements from neighbors who witnessed the family dynamic leading up to the assault. Evan's attorney finally stood. Your Honor, we do not dispute that an incident occurred, but my client wishes to clarify that his actions were reactive. He believed the victim was faking her injuries. He was emotionally overwhelmed. He suffers from untreated anxiety and impulse control issues. The judge held up a hand. I have seen the video. There is no justification for what I witnessed. The lawyer deflated, stepping back. Then Dad's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client did not physically participate in the altercation. Everything captured on video was taken out of context. He believed his daughter was manipulating the situation and reacted in frustration. This is a misunderstanding within a family that should not rise to criminal charges. The judge's expression hardened. Encouraging violence is not a misunderstanding. It is a crime, and the victim's injuries are not theoretical. They are documented. Dad puffed up his chest, raising his voice. She has always been dramatic. She knows exactly how to make people feel sorry for her. The judge slammed her gavel once. Sir, if you speak again without permission, you will be removed from this courtroom. The rest of Dad's words died in his throat. Then she turned toward me. Would the victim like to make a brief statement? My mouth went dry. Naomi squeezed my hand. You do not have to, she whispered. But I did. I needed to. I rose slowly, gripping my crutches. I felt dozens of eyes on me, but for once it did not make me shrink. My voice shook at first, but steadied with each word. I said I had spent years carrying the weight of my family, financially, emotionally, physically. I said I spent my entire life being told to protect my brother, to fix him, to cater to him even after he broke me. I said that the video was not an isolated incident, but the moment everything they hid slipped into the light. And I said I just wanted to live a life without fear, without obligation, without being hurt by the people who claimed to love me. When I finished, the judge nodded with something that looked almost like respect. After reviewing the evidence, I am moving both cases forward to formal charges. Bail for the defendant, Evan Quinn, is denied due to severity of the assault and risk to the victim. Bail for the defendant. Richard Quinn is set with strict conditions including no contact with the victim. The gavel fell. 3 sharp cracks. Final. Unwavering. And something inside me loosened. Something that had been wrapped tight for years. The hammer had fallen, and for once it landed on the right people. Physical therapy became the place where everything I had been avoiding finally met me head-on. Not just the pain in my leg or the weakness in my muscles, but the years of exhaustion carved into my bones, the weight of obligation, the reflex to shrink, the guilt I had been spoon-fed since childhood. Sandra, my physical therapist, greeted me each session with the same calm determination as if she already saw the version of me I was trying to become. She adjusted the height of my crutches, checked the swelling in my leg, and guided me through movements that felt impossible at first. Lifting my leg 2 inches off the table, flexing my foot against resistance bands, standing for longer than 30 seconds without shaking. Every time I wobbled, Sandra reminded me, your body remembers trauma. Healing takes time. Every time I stumbled, she said, do not apologize. There is nothing to be sorry for. I did not realize how often I apologized until the words kept slipping out like muscle memory. Sorry for being slow. Sorry for needing help. Sorry for the tears that came when my knee buckled. Sorry for the flashbacks that shook loose when someone raised their voice in the hallway. Sorry for existing. Sandra never let it slide. You have nothing to apologize for. Not here, not anywhere. And little by little, something in me softened. Something unclenched. One afternoon, 2 weeks after the hearing, Sandra had me stand between the parallel bars. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and rubber mats. A wall of mirrors reflected my trembling posture. I hated those mirrors at first because they showed me someone who looked weak, fragile, breakable. But on that particular day, I saw something different. I saw a woman with bruises fading into yellow, A woman standing on her own feet. A woman trying. Sandra positioned herself beside me. Today we let go of one crutch. My heart lurched. Already? She nodded. You are ready. I swallowed hard and released the left crutch. My leg wobbled. My balance swayed, but I did not fall. My grip tightened around the bar. Good, Sandra said gently. Now shift your weight. Slow. Controlled. Trust yourself. That last part hit deeper than she meant it to. Trust yourself. I exhaled shakily and shifted my weight onto my injured leg. Pain flared, but beneath it was something steady. Something stubborn. I held the position for 5 seconds. Then 10. Then 15. When I finally stepped back, my eyes burned with a different kind of tears. Survival tears. Proud tears. Sandra handed me a tissue and said softly, You are stronger than you think. That night, after Naomi brought dinner and filled my kitchen with warm conversation, I sat down at my laptop and opened the document I had started days earlier. The long, raw writing about my life, about my family, about the night of the barbecue. I had not intended to share it with anyone, but something about standing on my own leg that day unlocked a question I had been avoiding. What if my story mattered? What if someone like me needed to hear it? So I opened a free blogging site and created a page. No flashy theme, no fancy header, just my name and a blank space waiting to be filled. I copied my writing into the first post and hovered over the publish button. My finger trembled. Not because I feared the world's reaction, but because I feared being seen. Truly seen. Vulnerability had always been a luxury I was not allowed. But if the video had taught me anything, it was that secrets only protect the people who cause the harm, not the ones who survive it. I pressed publish. Immediately fear surged through me. What did I just do? But within hours, comments appeared. People thanking me for speaking up. People saying they had bruises like mine. Stories like mine, families like mine. People saying they felt less alone because of my honesty. I read every comment with a tight throat. I had spent my life believing my pain was invisible. Now, strangers across the country were saying they saw me clearly. The next week, Sandra had me try walking with only a cane. The wooden handle felt foreign in my hand, lighter than the crutches but heavier in symbolism. I took my first step with it wobbling but upright. My breath caught as the room tilted slightly. Sandra steadied me with a hand on my back. Find your center. You do not have to rush. I nodded. One step, then another. My leg shook with effort, but it held. My body trembled, but I stayed standing. When I reached the end of the bars, Sandra smiled. There she is, the woman who does not need anyone to carry her. I tried to laugh, but it sounded more like a sob. Later that night, sitting on my couch with my cane leaned against the armrest, I scrolled through the latest blog comments. Hundreds now. People sharing their trauma, their survival, their guilt, their anger, their hope. One comment stood out. You are the reason I scheduled my first therapy appointment in 10 years. I pressed a hand to my chest, overwhelmed by the weight of it. For so long, I had believed my voice did not matter. Now it was helping someone else find theirs. It felt like the universe was returning something I had been denied for years. Agency, belonging, worth. As the days passed, my body strengthened. My steps steadied. The nightmares faded. The tension in my shoulders loosened. I learned how to breathe without bracing. Then, one afternoon, Sandra stood back as I walked the length of the therapy room without the cane at all. My steps were slow, uncertain, but they were mine. When I reached her, she clapped her hands gently. That is not just walking, Mara. That is freedom. On the drive home, I stared at the city skyline glowing gold in the sunset. For the first time in my life, I did not think about what my family wanted from me, needed from me, or demanded of me. I thought about who I could become without them. I was learning to walk again, not just on my feet, but through the world, without fear, without guilt, without them. The morning I decided to meet my parents again began like any other. Soft light filtered through my curtains. The hum of traffic drifted up from the street below, and the plant Naomi brought me weeks ago sat on the windowsill, its pink flowers fuller than before. My leg felt stronger, steadier, almost foreign in its stability. I stood without the cane testing my balance. The floor felt solid. My body felt mine. But despite all the healing, something unfinished tugged at the edges of my mind. Closure, not forgiveness. Not reconciliation, just closure. So when my phone buzzed with a text from Mom asking for a chance to talk, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in my life, I could talk to them without needing their approval, without needing anything at all. I chose a public place, a small cafe near downtown with wide windows, quiet tables, and a slow morning crowd. I arrived early, ordered tea, and sat where I could see the door. My hands did not shake. My heartbeat stayed steady. A few minutes later, my parents walked in. Mom saw me first. Her face flickered with something like relief, but relief laced with fear. Dad looked tired, older, but still wearing the same expression he had the day of the barbecue, as if the world had wronged him personally. They approached my table. Neither reached out to hug me. Neither asked if I was healed, if I was safe, if I was sleeping at night without pain. They just sat down, and for a moment, none of us spoke. Mom cleared her throat softly. "You look strong." It was the closest thing to kindness she had ever offered without strings. I nodded once. "I am." Dad leaned back, arms crossed. "The court situation is getting out of hand. They are talking about adding more charges. You can stop this." My jaw tightened. Dad continued, his tone growing sharper. "You do not want to see your brother locked up for years, do you? You do not want to destroy this family." I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time saw not authority, not power, not the man I had spent years trying to please. I saw a bully who finally met consequences he could not dodge. I answered evenly. "I did not destroy this family. Evan did. And you did." Mom flinched, but Dad's eyes hardened. He always had a temper. "You know that. You should not have pushed him." I almost laughed. His temper. The excuse used to smooth over every bruise, every broken object, every threat. Mom's voice wavered. "We just want things to go back to normal." A hollow ache grew in my chest. That was the problem. Normal had always meant me diminishing myself so they could shine. Normal meant absorbing the blows, the insults, the financial exploitation. Normal meant carrying a family that never once carried me back. I took a sip of tea, letting the warmth steady me. "There is no normal to go back to." Mom clasped her hands. "We miss you. We want our daughter back." I felt a sharp pang deep inside. A younger version of me would have fallen for that line, would have crumbled at the word daughter, desperate for affection. But I was not that girl anymore. I met her gaze calmly. "You do not miss me. You miss what I gave you." Silence dropped over the table. Dad scoffed, shaking his head. "You have become so ungrateful. After everything we did for you." I leaned forward slightly. "You did nothing for me. I paid for Evan's school, his car, his fines, his insurance. I paid your bills when money was tight. I worked until I crashed my car from exhaustion, and you asked me about Evan's payments before asking if I was alive." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I never meant to hurt you." I believed her. I also knew it did not change anything. I was tired of carrying the burden of their intentions while drowning in the consequences of their actions. I said softly, "You hurt me because it was easier than holding him accountable." Dad's frustration boiled. "So what now? You walk away from your family." I straightened my shoulders, feeling the strength in my spine. "Yes." His jaw dropped. Mom reached out a trembling hand, but I gently moved mine away. "I am not doing this out of anger," I said quietly. "I am doing it because I finally understand something. I owed you nothing, and I owe myself everything." Dad's face twisted with outrage. "You are abandoning your blood." I stood slowly, without help, without wobbling, without fear. "I am choosing myself," Mom whispered. "Mara, please." But the word no longer had power. I reached for my bag, slipped it over my shoulder, and pushed my chair back. For the first time in my life, I saw my parents clearly. Two people who loved the idea of me, not the reality of me. Two people who preferred a daughter who bent until she broke over, one who stood tall. I looked at them one last time. I hope you find peace, but I will not be the one to give it to you. I turned and walked toward the door. My steps were slow, deliberate, painful, but not from my leg. A different kind of ache, a necessary one. When I reached the exit, sunlight poured over me, warm, bright, unapologetic. I took one final breath and stepped outside. The door closed behind me with a quiet click, a simple sound, a small sound. But in my chest it thundered. It was the sound of boundaries forming at last, the sound of breaking a cycle, the sound of choosing myself after a lifetime of being chosen last. As I walked away, I felt the world open wide and full of possibility. My steps were steady. My heart was light. My future was mine. And I knew with absolute certainty that I did not walk away because I was broken. I walked away because I finally healed.